Guitar tips, guitar tips, just the tips, just for you. Guitar tips. Hello and welcome to Guitar Tips. My name is Adam Levy. Guitar Tips is my weekly video blog series. I post a brand new tip here each and every Friday. Just the tips, just for, you guessed it, just for you. This week I'm bringing you part 2 in a 7-part mini-series about the melodic minor modes, the modes of the melodic minor scale. So the name of this guitar tip is Let's Demystify the Melodic Minor Scale, Part 2. There's a truck backing up nearby. I'm going to continue. Oh, it's getting closer. Well, if a truck comes through the wall, call for help. Anyway, I'm going to continue on. So last week in part number 1, we looked at the G melodic minor scale, and I'm going to just grab a fingering right here. And we looked at a couple of sort of vocabulary things, jazz, bebop vocabulary, and they mostly had to do with playing around G minor triads. And that's kind of all based around these 2 G minor triads are up here. So that's the sound of the G melodic minor scale. And as we go week by week, I may change keys, but for right now, I want to stay in that scale, but go to the second mode of G melodic minor. So if you recall from last week, the notes of G melodic minor are G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. And if you're thinking in G, that's 1, 2, flat 3 or minor 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the repeat at the octave. So if we start on A and play those notes, we're going to get A, B flat, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A. Now, if you know your major scale modes, one way to look at this scale is to say, okay, this is the second mode. So it might have something to do with Dorian, because in the major scale, the second mode is Dorian. And we would just have to change one note. So that's true. Some people will refer to this scale as the Dorian flat 2. And it's called that because if we were going to play A Dorian, that would be this. But because we're playing G melodic minor, we've got a B flat. So you could call that A Dorian flat 2. I personally don't tend to think of it that way because the application of where we use this scale is so different from Dorian. This is, it's like I probably wouldn't use this scale to play So What by Miles Davis or Oye Como Va or any kind of songs that we associate with Dorian. So although it is a Dorian flat 2 scale, that might be confusing when we go to apply it. So let's see if there's another way to think of this. And some people will refer to this as Phrygian natural 6. And let's look at what that is. So Phrygian, normally Phrygian starting on A would be kind of a relative of the F major scale, and so it would have B flat in it, and it would go like this. That's A Phrygian. So if we put a natural 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's relative to A, this F note is a flat 6. And it's called that because in an A major scale, we would normally have F sharp. So that's when we say a scale has a flat something or a natural something, that's compared to what we expect. So normally in A Phrygian, we have 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and then the root again. But because we're thinking about G melodic minor, we've got F sharp, and so that gives us this. So it's kind of like A Dorian with a flatted 2, and it's kind of like A Phrygian with a natural 6. But neither of those really get at the heart of what we're going to do with this scale in a jazz setting. Both Dorian and Phrygian are usually thought of as minor scales. And here, if we think of it as some kind of A minor, it's going to be kind of an odd one because it's going to have flat 9 and natural 13. And though it's a lovely sound, it's pretty rare in tunes that I can think of to see a tune where there's a chord symbol that says A7 13 flat 9, or sorry, A minor 7 13 flat 9. But it's not that uncommon to see a chord symbol like A 13 flat 9 sus, or even just A7 flat 9 sus. Of course, you could put the 13 on there if you just like the sound of it. So this is A7 flat 9 sus, and I say that because this note is what makes it A7, that's a G natural. B flat is what makes it a flat 9, and D is what makes it a sus, because normally on a dominant A chord we'd have C sharp, that's the 3rd. In a sus chord we'd have the 4, that's D. So what it really is great for is for dominant sus flat 9, and it also has sharp 9, and it has a natural 13. So it's a really excuse me, let's get, there we go, super colorful chord sound and scale sound. You could, of course, play it when the chord says plain old A7, and you would just be putting some kind of special sauce on there that's not built into the chord. Just kind of messing around, but trying to incorporate some of those licks that we looked at last week as well. So that's that sound. Anytime you see A7 flat 9 sus, you could try this scale out. And if the chord just says plain old A7, you could try this scale out. The only times I would maybe avoid it is if the chord symbol says something about a flat 13, because the flat 13 on A7 is F natural, and we're going to be using the natural 13, which is F sharp. So it's a really special sound. I want to introduce one more concept while we're talking about melodic minor modes. A lot of times for a certain kind of color in any scale, now what I'm about to say applies to any scale, but specifically we're going to look at it in this melodic minor mode context. Sometimes a neat sound can be to pull the two major triads built on the 4 and the 5 of the parent melodic minor scale. I'm sure some of you are now just staring blankly at the screen wondering what I'm talking about. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if we're using G melodic minor as the parent scale here, which we are, starting on A, that's the second mode, but the real parent scale here is G melodic minor. If we harmonize it in triads, in other words, if we build a 3-note chord off of each note in the scale, we'd get G minor, A minor, B flat augmented, that's the 3 chord, and then the 4 chord is C, and the 5 chord is D, and then E diminished, F sharp diminished, and G minor. Hope that makes sense to all of you. So those are the triads, and the 4 and the 5, as I said, are major. So if we're improvising over a G minor 6, as we were last week using the first mode, besides all the kind of bebop vocabulary stuff, you could also play lines that alternate just alternating D and C triads. And what's appealing about that sound is two things, I think. One is, of course, you could pick any 2 notes from the melodic minor and any 2 triads from the melodic minor and see how they sound moving together. But you want to be careful to pick 2 that have no notes in common. So if we pick the 4 and the 5, we can safely bet that there's no notes in common. So as we run these kind of things up and down the neck, we get 6 individual notes. So that's one thing that's kind of appealing about the sound. The other is that even though this is a very foreign, unusual kind of sound, we're using pretty little major triads. And of course you could use spread voicing triads, and you could just use pieces of triads. Right? I'm just using little kind of 2-note segments of each of the triads as I moved around there. So all that same stuff now, you could go back and mess around with that for last week, but you could also use it over this sound, this A. Sorry, the sunshine is kind of blotting out my fingers here. I just realized that that's a mess. But so this again is A flat 9 sus 13. I'll just leave. That's kind of neat with the open E. So now I'm going to do the same kind of thing. that's something you can experiment with in any of the melodic minor modes that we're going to look into in this series. I'm using, again, the 4 and the 5, which are both major triads from the parent melodic minor scale. You could also apply this to major scale modes. It's just a concept that is useful in jazz improvisation. It's not limited to the melodic minor scales. So that's it for now. Experiment, find chord voicings, try just any 2 notes from G melodic minor and put them over A and see what happens. Put them over an A bass note. So I fibbed. I said that was it, but this is one more concept you can try. Instead of moving, predictable chord forms up and down, just take an A bass note and just try and grab any 2 notes of this scale, G melodic minor, and hear how that sounds. And see if you can start to get some sort of things that maybe 1 in 10 of those will sound really great to you, and then you could write it down and make that one of your kind of pet chords instead of always playing a real literal chord shape. You could just get to know little tidbits. Okay, lots of stuff to think about. I hope helpful and not too confusing. That is the second mode of the G melodic minor scale. You can call it A Dorian flat 2. You can call it A Phrygian natural 6. You can call it whatever you like. It basically outlines an A dominant 7th, sus 4, flat 9, sharp 9, natural 13, or any kind of subset of that. Okay. Let's demystify melodic minor scales. Part 2. The end. I'm Adam Levy. Stay tuned and take good care.